Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the 3C Foundation of Canada, I'd like to wish you all a very warm welcome to the second annual IBD Youth Get Together. It's fabulous to see so many familiar faces from last year. We have an exciting evening planned ahead with programming that's hopefully going to help meet the needs of both youth and parents here this evening. We hope that you find this evening very supportive on your journey with IBD. We hope you learn some new information, some good tips and strategies on how to live well with inflammatory bowel disease. We also feel it's very important that you understand you're not alone on this journey. All of us in this room has been touched by IBD one way or another. And so we want you to know that one of the main objectives this evening for the Youth Get Together is to gut youth together. And so if you could just put our message to you this evening on the board is, when I is replaced by we, even illness becomes wellness. So following our keynote speaker, the youth will be invited to enjoy our fantastic workshops that are taking place down the hall. You're more than welcome to stay here. Some of the older youth may choose to take part in the education sessions. It's entirely up to you. But we have a fantastic team and evening ahead for you. And Michelle will come forward a little bit later and let you know when it's time to go over. So, without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you this evening our keynote speaker. I have the privilege of sitting on the executive board of Got Inspired with this young lady. Her name is Lindsay, and I'm sure you've all had a moment to take a look at her bio. But just to refresh your memory, Carly was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis at the age of 9. 6 weeks after her diagnosis, she received a permanent ileostomy. Carly is currently a Queen's nursing student, and fortunately for all those IBDers out there, she plans to continue her studies in gastroenterology and enterostomal nursing. So Carly, I think you have some really exciting, inspiring stories to share with us, including your journey to base camp at Mount Everest. So please join me in warmly welcoming Lindsay.
Okay, so as Michelle said, my name is Lindsay, and I am 20 years old right now, and I'm at Queen's University for nursing. I just finished my second year. So right now I'm 20, but my story really starts at the age of 9, when right out of the blue, I was hit with a very severe case of ulcerative colitis. It only took about a week for me to get diagnosed. There was a point where I just forgot to flush the toilet once, and my mom found blood. I was actually hospitalized for 6 weeks in McMaster Hospital in Hamilton, Ontario. And it basically came down to me having to have an ostomy. The steroids weren't working, and I was pretty much running out of options. And I was also getting a blood transfusion every week while I was there, and I was pretty much on a clear fluid diet, which meant that I ate a ton of Jell-O, which was not always very pleasant. So with my ostomy, I was discharged about a week later, and after that, it was probably the best thing in my life. I went swimming about 6 weeks after, and was pretty much a normal kid. Oh, thanks. So while I was facing IBD, I didn't really come out and tell everyone immediately when I was diagnosed. I had my ostomy, and I was just kind of dealing with that on my own. And it's about it for that one. And then in grade 11, I had the opportunity to trek with Rob Hill from Ideas to the base camp of Mount Everest to raise awareness for Crohn's, colitis, and those living with ostomies. And that was a big thing for me. I had always had my group of ostomy friends from camp, and then I had my friends at school and around town. So with the trip being a go, I kind of had to tell my friends before they found out from someone else. So this was our semi-formal picture where my mom kind of broke the ice and left me to tell the rest. And it turns out that my friends were really great. We all made matching shirts, and they came to a lot of my speaking events afterwards, so they were very supportive. And this was part of the training for my trek. This is actually one of my friends on the trek with me. And training for the trek meant that I had to do a day of hiking a week, the Spartacus workout on your core muscles, which is a lot of squats and lunges and push-ups and not very fun stuff. And it involved a 3 or 4 mile jog 3 or 4 days a week. And that was pretty tough on me because I had never been sports-minded, and ballet and dresses were more my cup of tea. And a bigger challenge for the trek would be keeping a positive attitude over the effects of the altitude. Yes, it was going to be a very physical trek, but you had to keep your mind in shape as well. And then I started speaking publicly about my illness and my ostomy. So I made a deputation to the local council, Sunrise Rotary, and the best part was my friends set up a school assembly. So I told about 600 of my closest friends in the high school about my ostomy, and it was really great because there was actually one person that reached out to me afterwards saying that she had a friend that was dealing with something similar. And there's me and my GI. And I did this to show all other kids out there that IBD doesn't stop me and that it shouldn't stop anyone else from reaching their goals. And this was the website that was set up to follow the trek. It was called No Guts, No Glory. And it followed all of our training and awareness leading up to the trek. And it was my mom's main form of communication for seeing what I was up to while on the trek. And here's our pre-boarding picture. So initially I flew from Hamilton to Vancouver to meet up with Rob and Clinton. And then we flew to Hong Kong and then Kathmandu from there. And this was our pre-boarding picture in Vancouver Airport with enough baggage to get a $600 surcharge for being overweight. Most of the stuff was Rob's, I will add, because the plan was to leave him at base camp as he was going to climb to the summit of Mount Everest, where Clinton and I were only going to base camp. So here's a view of Kathmandu from our hotel rooftop. And from the rooftop, you could actually see, hear, feel, and smell the city. It was kind of like being overwhelmed in every sense. And Nepal only opened its borders to the public in 1950, and not much has changed since then. It was a pretty good crash course in culture shock. And the power came and went every 4 hours as it was rotated throughout the city. And trust me, you did not want to get stuck in an elevator during that time. And here's one of the washrooms. So they were all squat toilets, and they had buckets of water for flushing. And the water also wasn't safe to drink. And these washrooms made me really glad to have an ileostomy. And then we went on another flight inland to Lukla, where we would start our trek. So here's a picture of the plane. We all got a window seat. There was no need to argue. And you could even see out of the pilot's window, which may or may not have been such a good thing. Because this is the landing pad. It's the only paved roadway in town, and landing sounded a lot more like crashing. But before we actually landed, we made a sharp turn between the mountains, dropped about 1,000 feet in half a mile, and then watched another plane take off the runway as we were kind of coming into land. And it was probably the scariest thing ever. And once you land, you can't see it in this picture, but there's actually a brick wall topped with barbed wire at the end of the runway, which you can see because you can see out the pilot's window. So here's a map of how far we have to trek. So we're starting at the bottom there in Lukla and going up to the red dot, which is Everest Base Camp. It's about 140 kilometers, which doesn't seem like that much, even though it's spread over 13 days. But you don't know how altitude will affect anyone, and your body has to create more red blood cells to carry the oxygen to your body's vital organs. So we're going to take it day by day and kind of see how the group feels, and to avoid altitude sickness. So this is our picture of day 3. This was hiking into Namche, which is the biggest trading center in the Himalayas. And the entire day was uphill. It was like 8 hours of uphill. And every time you thought you're getting closer to Namche, there was another corner, another hill, or another huge suspension bridge, like the one in the middle of the picture. And I think I was a little too naive to be afraid, not that I had much of a choice. And by now it was really dragging on. It was late afternoon, and Phil and I were at the back of the pack, and it was a really long day. And then finally, the rooftops of Namche Bazaar were in sight, and I was absolutely thrilled because the guys kept promising me chocolate cake waiting at the end. And it was the best piece of chocolate cake I have ever had. It was also the best $3 I've probably ever spent in my life. From here on out, it was a pretty slow trek. Everyone just kind of worked at their own slow muscle aching rhythm, and yawns and breaks increased a lot. And here I was standing in the Himalayas with Everest behind me, which is about 29,000 feet high, or 8,855 meters above sea level. And that's higher than any spot in Canada, including the Rocky Mountains. Looking back over while trekking offered some pretty incredible sights, such as the rooftops of Ding Boucher, which was one of the towns that we stayed in. And it was also the spot of the nicest shower. It was the first one in 7 days. So we all kind of smelled like yaks at that point, but it was amazing. Now we're going to fast forward to day 10. So this is a side trek that we took to a place called Kalapatar, and we do it the day before base camp, usually, and we did it to see. It offers the best views of Everest. So you have to get up really early in the morning, and it's another 400 meters of elevation gain, but it was definitely one of the toughest treks that I've ever done. And by this point, I also had what's called the Khumbu cough, which is a lot of chest congestion from the altitude, and coughing in that air just about did me in. But it was definitely worth it for this breathtaking view of Everest and Lhotse, and that definitely made it all worth it. There was a lot of pictures being taken of our summit, and it temporarily made the aches and pains of hiking disappear. At this point, I also had a really upset stomach from coughing, so it was a ton of fun. One of our sponsorship banners came out, so the Changing Attitudes with Altitude sponsorship banner came out. And Clinton's favorite picture with the Olympic mittens, because it was the year of the Olympics. So it was a lot of fun, and it made all of the pain kind of worth it. And we also caught a glimpse of our final destination, which was Everest Base Camp. And a zip line here sure would have been nice. So we hiked down the trail back to Gorak-Shep, which was the town, for lunch, and then we were going to head up the main trail in the afternoon. So we actually fell asleep and had a nice little nap between ordering and actually getting our lunch, which was great. And then it took another 3.5 hours of slugging on this jagged terrain before we had actually made it to base camp. And that was probably the worst terrain that we trekked through on the entire trek. It was so rocky, and it looked kind of like you were on the moon. And you couldn't travel in a straight line because there were so many ice boulders, lakes, and giant rocks. And then reality set in. We were at the edge of base camp, but base camp covers about 32 acres in total. So it was a false hope that our day was almost over. And little did we know that the No Guts, No Glory base camp would be closest to the icefall, which meant that it was the furthest away from where we currently stood. It was another hour and a half of slugging on this jagged terrain before that we heard welcomes from Rob and John and the climbers and our Sherpas welcoming us. And if you look at this picture, it looks like we were actually on the moon. And I will point out that the bathroom was the black tent in the middle of the picture. And at base camp, they have pretty strict rules, and nothing gets left behind when you leave, including the contents of the outhouse. And waking up here was pretty much like being in a dream. I could hardly believe that I was there, and I was also very thankful that we would be here for the next 2 days, because that meant lots of sleep. And this is my final slide. So who knew that having an ileostomy as a result of a severe case of ulcerative colitis would lead me to where I am today and be on the speaking circuit? Through my efforts, I've spoken to about 40 community groups trying to raise awareness and funds for IBD. And if I can overcome these challenges, survive the illness, and live life to the fullest, anyone else can too. And that's about it. The world's wide open. So if you guys have any questions.